generally what happens with trauma, injury, illness is that something has happened in our lives that has left a vibrational frequency that gets trapped in us, and that becomes an energy block. And when we don't deal with our issues, those blocks grow and grow, they compound until they become really stuck. And what happens is the blocks start in our energetic body, in our auric field, then in our, if they grow deeper, they move into our chakras. And when they grow really, really deep and they really are unresolved, they can manifest physically. And so part of what I do is to work with the energetic component of that trauma and to release it so that the person can get relief. But I do want to say that I am not somebody who denigrates modern medicine. I think there's a real place for it. So whatever I'm saying, the caveat is, seek help. If you've got a real disease, go to a doctor. But more and more, I don't know if you've noticed, but more and more hospitals, particularly in the US, have got these alternative healings as kind of adjunct therapies. So if you go to the Cleveland Clinic's website, you'll see they offer Reiki and they offer acupuncture.
Hiya! Hello all and welcome to episode 23 of Transform Your Future with me, Eddie Isin, where I sit down with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and high achievers as they identify areas I can improve on and guide me to further my self-improvement practice. For more information and insights, join the newsletter at transformyourfuture.com, where I write about reinvention, personal growth, and identity. We want to hear from you. Let us know how we can improve your listening experience. Please reach out to us through our website, your podcast app, comment, or just text me directly at 813-722-1417. I'm serious. I want to hear from you. In this episode titled Battling Chronic Pain and Trauma, Discover the Secrets to Pain Relief Through Energy Work, our guest is Gabrielle Pimstone, ex-corporate leader turned energy master and coach. Gabrielle is an expert in organizational psychology and energy healing. She shares her profound insights on how addressing the energetic roots of our pain can lead to transformative relief from chronic pain, anxiety, and trauma. In our conversation, she reveals the power of techniques like Reiki, acupuncture, and chakra balancing, explaining how they can help us manage pain by balancing our body's energy fields and alleviating emotional blockages. If you've been struggling with chronic pain or trauma and are looking for new holistic approaches to pain relief, like I am, you won't want to miss this episode. Throughout the interview, Gabrielle provides actionable advice on integrating energy work into our daily routines, from mindful language practices to the importance of gratitude and spending time in nature. I was really excited about her discussion of the significant impact of our dreams. Gabrielle explained that dreams have a profound effect on our healing journey and offered practical tips on harnessing their power for personal growth. As we explore these topics, you'll learn how energy healing can complement traditional medical treatments and why it's becoming a recognized practice in hospitals. Stay tuned to discover the secrets of energy work and how it can help you transform your future and find lasting relief from chronic pain, traumatic experiences, and how it helps you raise your vibrational frequency. Welcome to Transform Your Future, Gabrielle. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me, Eddie. I am going to say something that's going to sound really crazy. I'm freezing cold. I live in Australia and I'm freezing cold. We're having a bit of a cold snap. It's winter here. But other than that, all good, and really looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, I'll try to send you some of my warm vibes because summer has already started here and we're in 95-degree weather already. So tell me a little bit about your area of expertise, because I'm very excited. I want to learn more. I want to learn how I can apply energy and energy healing to my life so that I can feel better and, be more active and do more.
Yes. Oh, well, that sounds great. Well, my background, which I kind of still bring in to my practice today, is psychology, organizational psychology, and my speciality is the human response to change. What happens to people when they are going through a period of transition, transformation,
Mm,
maybe a moment of
mm,
healing? What are some of the things we typically go through, and how can we get over some of the common hurdles? So that's I guess, the meta process I take my clients through. But I work in a psychological way, and I also bring in this idea of energy, because everything is energy, Eddie. I mean, our
mm,
thoughts, our beliefs, our
mm,
behaviors, the decisions we make, they leave an energetic stamp. And
mhm,
what I worked out, having been working in psychology and having been in therapy for decades myself, is that I gained significant self awareness. I knew my triggers, I
mm,
knew everything, but I couldn't shift my biggest issue, which was anxiety, and it had
mm,
dogged me all my life.
mm,
And when I started studying energy, I realized that this was the way out, because instead of talking your way into insight and trying to kind of transmute experiences that way, we can actually go to the energetic inception point of where it all happened, and we can
mm.
release the energy that's left over from our trauma, and that does the trick.
Yeah.
So that's my modality.
So your background, we were talking about your background. We are talking about energy work that you were looking into, and how you got prompted into doing that work and changing from your psychology background.
Yeah.
Let's go a little bit deeper on what triggered you. I know you mentioned to me that it was a podcast that got
Yes.
you thinking about this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'd love to, because I'm a big proponent of podcasts, because I think one changed my life and I believe they have that capacity. So I had lived with anxiety all of my life, and it was made extra, I was super, super anxious at one point in 2020, partly because of the pandemic, but also I was in this really senior leadership role in a bank, of all places. It was dry, but it was really stressful, and I hated it. And I
Mm,
actually woke up one Sunday morning and I tuned in, and I had this really raging pit in my stomach, butterflies. And I tuned in and I said, "What's going on here? This is really out of control now." And the answer that I got was that I was feeling this way because the next day was Monday. And even though
mm,
I wasn't going into the office, it was the pandemic, the mere
yeah.
thought of dialing in on Zoom and interacting with that world left me feeling really kind of almost
Mm,
paralyzed by fear. So, I'd been trying all my usual psychological tactics to reduce my anxiety, and nothing was working. And I went for a walk and I listened to this podcast, which to anyone else would be an innocuous podcast. To me, it changed my life. There was a woman being interviewed. She has had a daughter, or has a daughter. Daughter was involved in a bad car accident years before that, but had since recovered, was now expecting her first child. And this woman couldn't celebrate the moment. She was just talking about feeling really being trapped in this ongoing cycle of anxiety ever since her kid had been so badly injured, always waiting for the other shoe to fall when things got too good. That was my story. And so there was something in her words that woke me up to this invisible prison I'd been living in my head. The bars had kept me trapped in ongoing cycles of anxiety and dread, and always waiting for the other shoe to fall. And it was in that moment that I realized I've got to do something about my life. And it's no longer what I want to do. I actually have to do it, because my health was suffering, and all sorts of other, there had been fallout in many other ways. And so it was that sparked it. And, when I woke up the next morning on the Monday, I actually phoned the employee assistance program to talk through, should I resign, shouldn't I? And I landed up resigning there and then. So it was a long build up, but there was a catalyst, and we always need catalysts to get us off the starting blocks in life.
absolutely. And,
Yeah.
as you said, pain is a great motivator, for us. It's like God, the force in the universe letting us know there's something wrong. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's like it's the evidence that what we're doing we can't continue with the status quo. But it's interesting because I use a concept in my work and now in my life as well that was introduced by, I don't know if you know Michael Beckwith, he's a spiritual thought leader. I think he's fabulous. And he kind of put forward that there are two primary ways that people change. But both are catalysts for change, but they're very different catalysts. The first one is what we're talking about now. He calls them Kensho moments, Kensho. And these are moments of suffering. These are moments of pain that wake us up and that make us say, this is enough. And, examples of that might be like what I was going through. My anxiety was just so debilitating. I couldn't live with it anymore. You could be, sometimes, you're in a relationship that ends, that prompts a moment of kind of reflection. What are my relationships patterns and what am I going to do about it? Sometimes Kensho moments are you've always been fit and healthy, then you find a lump, you go to the doctor and you're diagnosed with a disease. And the thing, though, it is most of us wait for these moments to make change in our lives. And that was me. So my inflection point was painful. But Michael talks about a second kind of catalyst for change. He calls those Satori moments, Satori. These are the sudden moments of insight. You read a line in a book or, you listen to somebody on a podcast, it gives you goosebumps, or you go, oh gosh, that's my story. You have a moment where, either feedback really lands or you read something, you have a revelation. And these moments can also be used as a catalyst for growth. So the difference is, do you grow through pain or do you grow through insight? And so I teach people how to lean into moments of insight or even deliberately create them so that you don't have to wait for the crisis. You can move forward in your life in a different way. Yeah.
Yes, I very much identify with that. The first big transition and transformation and reinvention that I did for myself was through an enormous amount of pain. It was so much pain that I was willing to do what was ever necessary. I would have, if somebody would have said, you need to spin on your head and, spit nickels, I would have done it because I was just so sick and tired of being in that pain. And I too, over time, started to think, well, I should probably figure out how to not wait until I want to kill myself before I make some changes forward. And so that's been a lifelong process with me. Again, I know we were talking privately, and I just want to mention again, like, I have these physical problems in life, these physical, disabilities, and I've been working on them for many years, avoiding major surgeries. And now I'm at that point again where they want me to have a major surgery and they're pushing for that. And I don't want to do that. So I've really been looking at ways that I can use the force for good in the universe to bring that energy in to help heal some of these issues for me. So I'm very much listening and interested.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk, and I'm sorry that you're going through that, not knowing what you're going through. It sounds that it's been debilitating, but it's really interesting you bring that up, because a couple of weeks ago I went to the hospital to see a friend of mine who'd had her second hip replacement. And after a day, she was just walking around. And I said to her, this is incredible. Like, she was literally walking almost unaided. And she said something really interesting. She said, the pain of living with the hip, whatever was going on in her hip, far outweighed the pain of the hip replacement surgery. And she'd been putting it off. And so I thought that was a beautiful metaphor for change in our lives. Like, we put off having the metaphorical hip replacement surgery, but the pain of living with a painful hip that keeps you up at night, which was in her case, far outweighs, the discomfort of the healing process. And in fact, the healing process can be so rejuvenating.
Yes. Yeah. And, I feel like there's been many times in my life where I have been able to overcome illnesses in my body. I've been able to, through meditation and through, nutrition and eating right and relaxation, removing myself from stressful situations,
Yes.
all of those things together helped me to overcome many illnesses. I mean, I have, I got very sick when I was young, and most people get this illness and they have to have their liver replaced, or they end up dying, or they have to go through some terrible treatment. I was able to overcome that, and I still have the antibodies in me, but I don't have the viral load capacity that's doing any damage. So,
Yeah.
I believe that there's miracles are possible like that,
Yeah.
and I've been doing a lot of studying about these things, and so I'm just trying to be open
Yes.
to it.
Yes, that's right. And I mean, look, the way that I work with my modalities, I don't sell it as something that is a replacement for Western medicine, because I believe there's a place for Western medicine. But what I use it as is an adjunct, as a different modality. And what I'm doing with people is I'm helping them elevate and raise their vibrational frequency, raise their vibrational capacity, so that they can deal with whatever they're dealing with greater resilience, strength. They've got more in their cup to fight it. Let me put it that way. So an example of a couple of people that I've worked with, somebody who was about to go to have an operation followed by chemotherapy, and I worked with this person to really ready them for that surgery and just elevate their energetic capacity so they just had more strength and more fuel to go through that journey. And I did interestingly work with somebody who was about to go through gastric bypass surgery. And we did some work to physically prepare them, but also help them really explore their beliefs and their mindsets, and release some of the roots, the blockages around eating, overeating, and indulgence and food, the relationship with food, so that when they went through the surgery, they wouldn't relapse into bad patterns. So there are different ways that you can use this. I used energy healing I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but I cleared my migraine headaches. I used to have really bad migraine headaches, Eddie. I would wake up most mornings, with a bad headache that if I didn't take a tablet, it would just become debilitating. And what I realized, and this is the same with a lot of injuries and illnesses, is that this was trapped energy. It was trapped energy in what we call the third eye chakra, yeah? And the reason that I was experiencing it in the mornings was because we do a lot of work in our dreams, and I was not working through my stuff properly. I wasn't, making sense of my dreams. I wasn't actually doing the healing work, but I was still having dreams, and the energy was getting trapped here. And when I started working more consciously and intentionally with my dreams, and when I started balancing my energy throughout my body, that a trigger point just left. And to be honest with you, I don't want to tempt fate, but I haven't had a really bad headache. Oh, it must be about a year now. And, even when I go away, I still pack my headache medication just in case. So generally what happens with trauma, injury, illness is that something has happened in our lives that has left a vibrational frequency that gets trapped in us, and that becomes an energy block. And when we don't deal with our issues, those blocks grow and grow, they compound until they become really stuck. And what happens is the blocks start in our energetic body, in our auric field, then if they grow deeper, they move into our chakras. And when they grow really, really deep and they really are unresolved, they can manifest physically. And so part of what I do is to work with the energetic component of that trauma and to release it so that the person can get relief. But I do want to say that I am not somebody who denigrates modern medicine. I think there's a real place for it. So whatever I'm saying, the caveat is, seek help. If you've got a real disease, go to a doctor. But more and more, I don't know if you've noticed, but more and more hospitals, particularly in the US, have got these alternative healings as kind of adjunct therapies. So if you go to the Cleveland Clinic's website, you'll see they offer Reiki and they offer acupuncture, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had, as a result of my initial injuries in 1996 or 95, I blew out both my knees in the accident. I had to have knee surgery on one knee,
Yeah.
and they both bothered me repeatedly over the years. But I got better. I got healthier. I lost a lot of weight. I exercised. I ate right. I've been
Yeah.
really taking care of myself for a long time now. But at one point, a few years ago, when I was working in a high level again, and working 14-hour days, 16-hour days sometimes, a lot of standing on my feet and everything, my knees were really, really bothering me again.
Yeah.
So I had stem cell
Wow.
injections to my knees.
Wow.
And when I did it, I felt better. And when I talked to the doctor, he said, "So how you doing? Is it good?" I said, "Oh, it's great. I feel great. I don't have the pain." He goes, "Good." He said, "Did you believe it was going to work?" I said, "Yes, I believed it was working, and I believed it would work for me." He goes, "Great.
Yes.
Just keep believing that." So
Yes.
there's really also some component here, I find, that just my belief that
Yes.
something's going to work, my belief
Yes.
in it, opens the process up to let it
Yes.
happen.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you're talking about the placebo effect, which really
Yes.
is a lovely way of describing the interconnection between the mind and the body. So
Hmm.
really, what the placebo effect is if they did trials where they gave two tests groups
Hmm.
the same medication, and well, they said they were giving them the same medication. The one group got nothing, wasn't really medication. The other one got the medication, and both groups healed because the group that wasn't getting the medication believed that they were, and that was enough to trigger a healing response in them. But there's an interesting study, and it's just come to mind. I hadn't thought about this for about 2 decades, but I've just remembered it. There's something called the nocebo effect, which is the opposite of that. So I can't remember the story exactly, but many, many years ago, there was a guy who went to a doctor that he was misdiagnosed with cancer. And he had some serious disease, but it wasn't lethal, it wasn't fatal. And he landed up dying. And everywhere they thought he was dying from the cancer. It was a very rapid thing. And when they did an autopsy on him, they realized he actually didn't have cancer. He was fine. So that's the opposite because, when you believe you're dying of cancer and you don't have it, that look what happened to that guy. So that's almost the corollary. And so there's a very, very big connection between the mind and the body. And there's a field of medicine called integrative medicine that addresses this very thing where, mindfulness is now part of therapy, and there's a lot of power in that. So, our thoughts have power. Everything starts with a thought, and thought becomes a belief. A belief becomes an emotion becomes an action or behavior. A behavior becomes a habit, and a habit becomes your identity. So that's how it works. Power.
I
Yeah.
remember originally I was introduced to these ideas through Dr. Andrew Weil's books, especially 8 Weeks to Optimal Health, where he talked about that the body is a healing machine. It is designed to heal. You just
Yeah.
need to put yourself in that place so it can do the work that it needs to do. So
Exactly.
I definitely believe in that. So tell me, I'm just thinking, what are three misconceptions that people have about your energy work?
Well, to be honest with you, most people who come to me are drawn, it's like a self selecting process. So I don't really engage in that dialogue, but I imagine that there is a perception that it's out there woo woo, you've got to be sitting with a crystal ball, and nothing could be further from the truth because the way that I work is that physically we're energy, but also, as I said earlier, our thoughts. What are thoughts? They just have an energetic frequency. Our emotions all have an energetic frequency. And so actually you're best working at an energetic level with everything because that's really getting to the heart of things. So I imagine that would be a big misconception. Yeah, I mean, I think the other misconception that people have, because when I teach people how to manifest with energy as well, is that you can just kind of sit back and, the universe takes care of everything. No, healing is a very active journey. You've got to be very involved and engaged in doing stuff that takes you out of your funk. So that would probably be another a misconception. But as I said, I don't really rub up against those because people who come to me have gone past that barrier.
The people who come to you already ready. They
They're
know
ready.
that this is what they want to do for whatever their personal reasons are.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. I mean, I had one guy come to me. His wife had begged him to come, and he came, and I could tell he was just, not really into it. And then after we just did one session, because I usually sign up coaching sessions, but I just did one or feeling session. And afterwards he was like, I don't know what happened there. I'm going to have to go away and think about this, and then came back. So, I mean, the other thing that I do also believe, and I've had to believe this, is that you can't really work out how any of this works, because it's just like I know the fundamentals of how energy works and how energy healing works and what I'm doing. But actually, it's better if your mind kind of steps out of the way, and your mind actually doesn't have to be on board for all of this to work. But it's actually better if you really just lean into this process and see what emerges. It's pretty magical. And, the human body is not designed to, or the human mind is not designed to really understand these ethereal concepts. I think we'd implode if we actually knew exactly what was going on. But what I do is I kind of translate what I'm doing into easy language for people to understand, and I talk the language of emotions, feelings, beliefs, thoughts, limiting patterns. That's what people can understand and resonate with. Yeah, but the world's moving, Eddie. I think, these things are becoming more and more mainstream. As we said earlier, so many of those top hospitals are now advertising this as a complementary therapy. And so, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when I became a vegetarian, I was very young. No one was a vegetarian. Now everyone's a vegetarian, and veganism is taken. These things are just taking off, and I believe the world is changing.
I agree. 100%.
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways that you help clients embrace change and discover the joy in the journey?
Yeah. Well, I do it by helping them tap into Satori moments. So, even if a moment of pain and struggle is hit or adversity is hit, what I help them do is to find joy in the process of learning. Because even when we're going through painful moments, we are learning. We are in a learning mode. And I believe that all of us, or most of us, are motivated by progress in our life, by moving forward in our life. And so when you shift the conversation to insights, aha moments, catalysts for growth, and that's what people lean into. So how do you create a learning moment? How do you create change through insights? Well, you've got to lean into personal development and healing, and it's all about doing the work and, engaging in your journey mindfully and doing things that expand your self-awareness. I don't know many people who don't get a bit turned on by that. Most people actually, we're tapping into an innate human need for growth. Maslow's triangle. We don't want to be dealing with survival issues all the time. We actually want to be doing a bit of actualization as well. And so that's what I'm tapping into, because I love learning so much. I think that just rubs off on people, but I teach people how to be curious, how to tap into their dreams for wisdom. Things that are actually interesting and that help people gain greater self-awareness. And really the point in coaching is to move someone from point A to point B. That's progress, and that's what people really get turned on by.
So that was the second time, or maybe even the third time you mentioned dreams. a bit about how I can tap into my dreams to help get that wisdom?
Yes, I'm very happy to share that with you. I wasn't aware that I'd spoken about it so much because I'm very passionate about dreaming. I started recording my dreams when I was 8 years old, and I've been doing it ever since. So I don't record every dream, but only the really important ones that stand out now. But what you can do is, so what happens when we dream? We all know we go into a different state, brainwave state, and our unconscious just takes over. All our usual defenses, guards, goes by the wayside, and we go to crazy places in our dreams. We all know that. And if you didn't dream, and I try to explain to you what happened in a dream, you'd go, I think this woman needs some intervention. We go crazy places. Now, what I teach people to do is how to shift from having random dreams where we leave it to chance to working with your dreams intentionally, because there's a whole lot of wisdom in our subconscious, in our dream state that we want to tap into. And when we are dreaming, we are really honing our intuition. So here's a simple practice. Before bed, and you should probably repeat this for 7 to 21 days, depending on whether you remember your dreams or not yet. But every night before you go to sleep, get into a state where you're clear, you're quiet, you're relaxed, you're focused and present, and set and ask your dream state a question. I actually talk to my dreams. I say, dream, tonight as I go to sleep, please show me whatever the case is. And you can ask your dream different kinds of questions. You can ask your dream a diagnostic question. For example, dream as I sleep tonight, please show me why I am so angry. Just a stupid example. That's a diagnostic question, the why question. You can also ask your dream predictive questions, like dream as I sleep tonight, show me what it might look like if I moved from Sydney to Melbourne, if I changed cities, if I relocated, for example. So what you're doing is you're very consciously, you're waiting for a question that's really relevant. It's up in your life at the moment, bubbles up, pose it as a question to your dream. And then what you can do to amplify the energy around that, you could go to sleep, or you could do a little ritual that amplifies it. So, if it's, for example, why am I, so angry, you might want to put, and this is just an example, if you believe in crystals, like a rose quartz under your pillow, which has got the energy of love. You can do anything that really amplifies it. And then you go to sleep. And when you wake up, very first thing you do, Eddie, is you jot down what you remember. And you've got to do that quickly because dreams evaporate really quickly as well. So make that the first thing you do when you wake up. Jot down just the gist of it. And I teach people, what to look for in dreams as well. If you don't remember your dreams in the beginning of doing this, what you need to do when you wake up is just write down, take note of what you're feeling. How do you feel? What's your mood? What's the feeling when you wake up? Because that's also going to give you a entry into what you might have dreamt about. And this can take a bit of practice. If you do it sometimes 7 days, 21 days, you're going to really start remembering more and more. And, there's a skill and techniques for what to look for in dreams, but at a very high level, you're going to look for themes and recurring patterns. You're going to look at, people, what do they represent about you, context, where the dream is taking place. Dreams transition, they've got different chapters. What are the different chapters? How did you transition from the one chapter to the other? So there are different things you look for, and it's a beautiful skill.
I've been experimenting on and off with listening to sounds, theta waves, those kinds of things, when I'm going into that process to try to have some kind of lucid dreaming experience.
You could do that. They're different. There's that might be. I've not actually tried that. I used the age-old tactic. If you want to have a lucid dream, and for your listeners, lucid dreams are when you're dreaming. You're in a dream, but you become aware that this is a dream and you're in it. And that's really powerful because you really want to be able to, when you're conscious of a dream, you can actually change the course of a dream, which is quite interesting, or face a big fear head on. But this is the age-old practice. What you can do is, a few times a day, look at your hand and say, when I sleep and I see my hand, I'll know I'm dreaming. Now, it sounds like a crazy thing. Why am I doing that? Because you don't typically put your hand in front of your face very regularly. It's an out of the ordinary action. So when you do that and you say, when I sleep and I see my hand, I'll know I'm dreaming, you're setting up a stimulus, a trigger for knowing that you are dreaming. And because your dreams are not magical, that's your subconscious. So you're setting it up. And then when you see a hand in your dream, you'll know you're dreaming. And then there's a whole process on, because most of us, when we know we're dreaming, we startle and we get out of it. But there is a way to hold that down and to really enter the dream and do magical things with it.
And what about for those listeners who I feel like they don't dream or they don't remember anything?
Well, I challenge that because we do dream. There's like a continuum. So let's assume we all dream, but there's a continuum of I don't remember my dreams. So that the work with them is to go through that, practicing that practice that I told you about. You shift from I don't remember my dreams to I remember my dreams, or I remember more dreams. And you're doing that through practice. And every morning you're writing down how you feel when you wake up. That's all you need to do. You start getting snippets of the dream, and then eventually over time you'll get a full-on story. Okay? So it's practice. And then the next step is, once you remember your dreams, how do you make sense of your dreams? And how do you use them to heal? And that is the skill of learning to interpret your dreams and what to look for. And, what does that mean given what's happening in your life now? And then the next transition is, how do you move from understanding your dreams to deeply healing in them? And that's the shift into lucid dreaming. And I've just given you the tactic for lucid dreaming. It's really fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yes, I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Lots of actionable stuff for me to work on. What are some of the common signs, indicators that somebody, may to let somebody know that they may benefit from energy coaching?
Well, the biggest sign is that you've got repetitive patterns in your life. And those patterns can be anything, but for example, it could be chronic loneliness. That would be an example. In my case, I had constant, ongoing, debilitating anxiety. For others, always having money worries. Is there potentially a money block? For others, it's not being able to speak up, and self-expression has been a block. For others, it might be kind of a chronic tendency to procrastinate. And so what we're looking for is repetitive patterns that the person can't quite figure out. And even though they may have been, tried different things, they can't quite shift it because the energy around it is still there. So that's what we look for. The clue is always these repetitive patterns that we can't quite shift. We've thrown everything at it and we just don't know what to do about it. And so the block then is an energetic block which acts as an invisible handbrake. It really keeps you stuck in those cycles, stuck in first gear and unable to accelerate and move forward. For me, that was anxiety. I'd been, in therapy for decades because of the work that I did, but also my own personal journey. I'd worked with my dreams for decades. I'd done everything. And I exercise a lot, so I'm always moving my energy around. But nothing really helped until I started working, healing my trauma at an energetic level. And so that's sometimes why we've got blocks. We can't shift it until we go there. So yeah, that would be a clue.
Can we go a little bit deeper about, I know this is not the first time that I've heard of the idea that I could have blocks for certain things in my life, that I'm blocking things actually happening. Like, for example, you brought up money. Money's a very popular one, right? And so what are some, let's go a little bit deeper about how I could be blocking that. How can I be blocking the idea of abundance, and money in my life?
Well, you could be typically you can be it can be the block can form in childhood. So I can we'll talk about that in a moment. Interestingly, the block could form in utero, where maybe I'll give you a random example, and this is really just off the top of my head. Maybe while your mother was pregnant with you, she or your father lost their job and suddenly there were money concerns. So that might have been transferred to you. And sometimes it's actually transgenerational. So it's passed down from your grandparents or even beyond. So if you really go down the lineage, you'll realize that there's always potentially been just enough money, but no more, or not enough money, or whatever the case may be. There's been a struggle around money in the family. So they can start at various junctures, and that's the role I play, is to help decipher when did this begin. But say that it began in childhood, because that's the easiest example to use. And, it could be that, let's just go with the example I put up earlier, that, when you were very young, your father lost his job, you had a lifestyle change, you lost, you had to change schools, you might have been a private school, you had to go to a pub, and that was the inception point. And maybe out of that experience, you developed a limiting belief. And that limiting belief might have been money isn't safe. Just this is a silly thing, okay? Or there's not enough money to go around, or whatever the case may be. And that limiting belief, then it starts as a thought, becomes a limiting belief. And the emotional frequency around that is tight. When it comes to money, you might get anxious, there might be anxiety, there might be a sense of constriction. So there's an energetic frequency that you can throw into the mix. And then, from the beliefs and the emotions that you're feeling, you start to make different decisions, like foolish decisions about money, or your behaviors and actions might reinforce the sense that there's not enough to go around. And then before you know it, you've got a storyline around money. And that storyline, which has got different components to it, and that started when your dad lost his job when you were 3 years old, or whatever the case may be, there's an energetic root. And the frequency around that is debilitating, and it kind of carries through in your life. And so before you know it, when you leave school or university and you enter the job market, you start repeating those patterns. That's how it works. But it's interesting to me that it can start before childhood. And that's one of the things I didn't realize. This transgenerational stuff is really interesting and very powerful. For me, in my case, I had to break a transgenerational cycle of anxiety.
Yeah, I could definitely see around money how it's transgenerational. For example, my grandparents lived through the Depression. So a lot of the ways that they acted and the patterns that they did was because they lived through that Depression. So, some of those things were really silly that, I looked at and I thought, why are you doing that? Like saving everything, freezing lettuce, is like, but all these things were really just because they lived through that time where there wasn't enough, and they had that fear that, that was going to happen again.
Correct. Which was then passed on to your mother or your father, and it was then passed on to you. So the way that I work is I can read someone's energy, and I can go onto their timeline, and I can pinpoint where this started, where this began. Sometimes with great accuracy, and sometimes I might just say, look, there's something in your mother's line around this. I can't pick up your mother's mother, and then the person will either know it or go and research, and we'll kind of come back and talk about it. So it's really important to find the inception point. Otherwise, we're just healing at a superficial symptomatic level. And so when we go and that energy around the depression, to go and clear that energy from a family line is no mean feat. But can you imagine how powerful that is? You're carrying that frequency across the generations. And so, yeah, kind of what we're doing is we are helping people become cycle breakers, that this might have been passed down, but the pattern stops with you.
And so I understand, we develop these limiting beliefs, and these limiting beliefs block us from the true potential of what we can be doing or having in our lives, blocking us off from the abundant mindset and the universal abundance that exists instead of that scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
So how do we raise, once we identify that and we start working on breaking the cycle, how do we raise our vibrational frequency, as you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got complex techniques that I use and that I teach people that I couldn't kind of teach you here now. I work with something called sacred geometry, which is a healing. There are energetic patterns you find all throughout the world, and I use specific ones to do healing. But you know what? There are a lot of things that people can do themselves to, once they have gone through energy clearing, to maintain their energy. And it's really important to do that, because even if you've cleared yourself and you've been through a healing, life happens and our energy always oscillates. It's up and down. And you want to be in a position where you're proactive and where you are catching those dips before they become full blown. And this is what we call interrupting energetic dips, and there are so many things that we can do. But a simplest one is, there's a really great app, and it's an hourly chime app, and you can select how often it goes off. It can be on the hour, it can be every 3 hours, and to really tune in when that alarm goes off and just check in. Takes a minute. Ask yourself, how am I feeling? Or am I feeling open or closed? Am I feeling heavy or light? These are really simple but very powerful questions that help us go within and work out what's going on. There are more advanced ways of doing that, like body scans, really just scanning yourself from the top of your head to the tips of your toe, and really noticing and paying attention to the areas that feel constricted, or feel, what is the sensation? Where am I feeling it in my body? You could do that kind of stuff. The other way to really manage and maintain your energy is by watching your language, Eddie. The words we use are very, very powerful, and they give us a clue as to what's going on inside us. But once we think something or say something, we've created an energetic frequency around it, and that starts to grow and build and gather momentum. So in my case, I remember waking up one morning after a good night's sleep. I tend to sleep well. And I got out of bed and I heard myself say, I'm exhausted. And I was like, what is that? And then I watched that. I watched myself say those words throughout the day, throughout the days to come. And I got very curious. Why do I keep saying I'm exhausted? I have enough energy to work out, to do a 90-minute Ashtanga yoga class, I'm sleeping well, I'm actually energized. What's going on? And I realized that it wasn't physical. It was a state of burnout that I was articulating in those two words, I'm exhausted. And so paying attention to your language and being very mindful and careful with the language you use is another way to keep our energetic state intact and maintain a higher vibration.
In my career, I'm a certified sales trainer, and I work with teams and sales strategies for organizations, and training commission-only salespeople and solopreneurs to crush their goals and double and triple their revenues. And so I need to keep a very high energetic state all the time, and a very good emotional state all the time. So that's why I always say papaya. Papaya is my activation word, to remind myself that I need to be in that certain state all the time, and I do it repeatedly, during different times of the day. And I understand also that, like, gratitude is like the highest vibrational frequency, right?
It is one of the highest vibrational frequency. It's been termed the parent of all other virtues. It was a Roman philosopher, that Cicero, that said that. Because when you're in gratitude, it's like the doorway to other emotions or other states. So when you get into gratitude, it opens the door to humility. It opens the door to generosity. It opens the door to joy, all those things. And so it kind of is a meta state. It sits above and it opens the door. Once you get there, the frequency opens the door to other frequencies as well. And so gratitude practice is an enormous, enormous part of keeping your vibration high and maintaining your vibration. And what I'm doing and what I'm saying is not false gratitude. It's got to be authentic. And I know it's really difficult when we're going through tough times to practice gratitude, but you can always be grateful for the small things, like I love sunshine. Standing under the rays of the sun for a few minutes, I can be grateful for that. I love my morning coffee. I love it. And so, when I'm drinking it, I can do so mindfully and be very grateful that I have the wherewithal to buy a lovely cup of coffee every day. And so there are small things we can be grateful for, but it really is a very powerful tool for shifting energetic state. And as we said, it kind of leads to all other things.
Yeah. So, I mean, and not just small, but simple. Oftentimes my gratitude in the morning are just very simple things like I'm grateful I'm breathing. I'm grateful the sun. I'm grateful I'm alive and I have another chance today to do some good.
Exactly. There was some quote I once read about gratitude. I'm going to get it wrong, but the gist of it was, if you are going through a tough time, be grateful for the lessons. If there aren't any lessons, be grateful that you're not sick. If you aren't sick, if you are sick, be grateful that you're not dead. It goes on. There's always something that you can be grateful for. So gratitude practice is incredibly powerful. Yeah, it really is.
So what other habits or routines can listeners adapt daily to better manage their energy and enhance their lives?
Well, one of the simple routines or practices that actually doesn't take any more time is to spend time in nature. So nature's got really healing properties. I personally, I think I mentioned a moment ago, love the elemental energy of fire. So I love being in the sun. And how that might look in my day is I might, do most of my stuff online now. Back-to-back meetings, got a gap, feeling flat, and I go and stand in my garden for literally 5 minutes, and it transmutes that low vibrational energy. Gives me a pick-me-up. For other people, it's water. I live very close to a beach, and in midwinter, 5 a.m., you've got people swimming in the freezing sea because there's something about water, and particularly salt water, that's rejuvenating. And so that's another way. For other people, they find earth energy more grounding. So I know somebody, I grew up with him, who actually barely wears shoes. He's always barefoot. It's very grounding. So when he goes into the office, yes, he'll wear a pair of shoes, but at all other times you'll find him feet on the ground, barefoot, grounding. Find a way, and I do this often, instead of going to the gym, which is my default, go do an outside workout. Spend time in nature. That is incredibly rejuvenating, and it takes next to no time. It's just, something different. It takes a couple of minutes to be in the sun. Now that, when you're in the shower, just imagine the water cleansing you, or take a salt bath, put Epsom salts and soak in a salt bath and see what happens and how you feel. Easy things to do. So that would be another kind of lifestyle tip that I'd give people.
Those are great tips and great practices. Let me ask you this now: is there anything else you want to share about transformation and about reinventing yourself through adding these habits and working on your vibrational frequency?
I mean, I think the summary of it all, Eddie, is that energy runs the show. You can talk about your emotions until you're blue in the face, nothing's going to shift. when you work with the frequency of your emotion, everything shifts. Same with your thoughts, same with your behaviors. So if you really want efficient change, work at an energetic level and heal in your sleep. That's the most efficient way that you can really clear stuff, because we all go to sleep at night. Actually takes next to no time, just a couple of minutes in the morning to document what came up.
And I am definitely going to do that and check that out. And I'm going to put your information in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get more information from you and link to you, maybe set up a call or something like that, they'll be able to do that. I really appreciate your time and everything. And I'm going to be in touch. I'm going to let you know. I'm going to actually take the 7 to 21 days and start documenting. And I'll let you know how it goes.
You better. I'll be on to you. Oh, now you've committed. You've taken a public stand.
That's right.
All about it. And I look forward to your progress in that regard. Thank you so very much for having me and for the great work that you do.
Thank you very much. For more information and monthly topics of interest, please go to transformyourfuture.com and join our newsletter.